Here's something Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk, and Tucker Carlson haven't told you about Jeffrey Epstein. That while Epstein was serving time on his first conviction in 2009, Lord Peter Mandelson stayed at his house. Mandelson is the current British ambassador to the United States and was part of Tony Blair's political machine when he was prime minister. That should begin to give you a little more insight into how all of the sound and fury about the Epstein files is obscuring a much deeper battle that is going on. Most people think that the Epstein story is just about sex trafficking and compromising politicians and billionaires with underage girls. Well, that's certainly part of it. But if you're fixated on that, you'll miss Trump's history-making moves. Because the real battle is Donald Trump's commitment to free the United States from the empire's control which is exercised with the classic imperial tools of war and money. Epstein wasn't just running a blackmail operation. He was a key financial player in maintaining British imperial banking domination in the world. This is Susan Kokinda, and 1 year ago today, I was on the floor of the Republican convention in Milwaukee as part of the Michigan delegation, where I was privileged to watch Donald Trump launch his triumphant march to a second term as president. With over 50 years of political organizing against the modern-day British Empire under my belt, I can tell you that those 4 days in July, coming just after Trump's miraculous escape from assassination, marked a turning point in history. Now add to that a recently released interview with Russian President Putin, and you'll see emerging the potential for a coming world in which nations are sovereign, economically and strategically, and in which empires, today's globalists, are relegated to the dustbin of history. So in this midweek update, I'm going to look at 3 critical developments. How Putin's recent comments about the British and French empires provide the necessary context for understanding Trump's latest moves on Ukraine. Epstein's role as a financial player in maintaining British imperial banking domination, and Trump's political and economic counteroffensive. So let's start with Putin's comments that provide some crucial context for what Trump is doing. In a recently released interview, Putin dropped an observation about one of the most important elements of post-World War II history. He said, in some former colonial empires like Britain or France, they consider us responsible for the collapse of their colonial empires. And this historical negativity persists. The fact is, after World War II, the United States, along with Russia in some ways, worked toward the destruction of these empires and worked to assist the colonies in getting their independence and sovereignty. Now, that's the same outlook that Franklin Roosevelt had for the post-war period, an outlook which was sabotaged when British puppet Harry Truman instead threw America's might in with the British imperial and geopolitical schemes instead. And Putin kept coming back to the geopolitical underpinnings of how Russia was treated and lied to in the post-Soviet period. And he made clear that only sovereignty will protect Russia. He said, it became clear that until we assert ourselves as an independent sovereign power capable of defending our future, we will not be respected. Now, Trump understands that, and he's approached the question of settling the Ukraine war from the standpoint of treating Russia as a sovereign nation with legitimate interests, not as a perpetual enemy to be threatened and challenged. Look at his big announcement on Monday from that standpoint. It's not a capitulation to the neocons or a betrayal of its base. It's an attempt to end the bloodletting by setting a deadline which is actually being echoed by some in Russia, and shifting the payments for weapons deliveries to Ukraine onto the backs of the Europeans, who are the ones who are still pushing Ukraine to continue the war. Now, of course, the British press played their typical role of trying to heighten the U.S.-Russia tensions by taking recent leaked Trump quotes out of context, as this BBC headline shows. But the White House yesterday shut that down, and Trump himself responded to the BBC's prodding that he is done with Putin with a hard no, and said, no, I'm not done with him. Russia also took aim at the real culprit with this TASS headline. As for the other side of Trump's big announcement, the threat of potential secondary sanctions against Russia's trading partners, which is being pushed by perpetual war hawk Senator Graham, look at what is actually happening. Yesterday, Senate Majority Leader John Thune put Graham's Russian sanctions package on the back burner. He said, "It sounds like right now the president is going to attempt to do some of this on his own. If at some point the president concludes that it makes sense and adds value and leverage that he needs to keep in those negotiations to move the bill, then we'll do it." In other words, let Trump be Trump. And as for all the chatter that Trump has capitulated to the neocons and the globalists, why did Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth cancel all Pentagon participation at the Aspen Security Forum, with the Pentagon explicitly citing concerns about globalist influence? The elite British press is playing a major role at Aspen. The Financial Times, which just tried to blow up U.S.-Russian tensions, is moderating 5 panels. And The Economist, the mouthpiece for the City of London, is moderating 4. So now let's talk about the deeper significance of Jeffrey Epstein. Barbara Boyd, Mike Benz, and others have documented his role as a British intelligence asset. And unless you've been living under a rock, you know about his perversions. But I want to look at his financial career from a different standpoint, how he was embedded in the unraveling of the U.S. economy in the decades following the 1971 decision to take the dollar off the gold reserve standard. That ending of the post-war Bretton Woods system led to successive waves of bank deregulation that then opened the door to the speculative booms and busts of the 80s and 90s, and then the big one in 2008. Over that period, the traditional American commercial banking system was destroyed and replaced by the equivalent of a financial parasite, which was directed by the City of London and Wall Street. Epstein was in the middle of all of that. From 2000 to 2007, he was president of Liquid Funding Limited, an early innovator in mortgage-backed securities and other exotic derivatives. His company was partly owned by Bear Stearns, one of the most notorious players in this wild west of speculative bubbles. And between them, they helped ignite the 2008 financial crisis. And here's where Lord Mandelson comes in. According to a J.P. Morgan report written to cover their own asses on their relationship to Epstein, Mandelson and Epstein were in touch with each other on matters relating to the Federal Reserve in 2008 and on later congressional debates on the Dodd-Frank bill and the Volcker rule, both of which led to a continuation of the speculators' regime. Here's the relevant section of the J.P. Morgan report. Quote, "Can Jess, Staley of J.P. Morgan, send me an email on issues Ray Dodd's Volcker?" This was from Peter Mandelson to Epstein in 2010. And not only that, Mandelson stayed in Epstein's home when Epstein was serving time for his first conviction. Epstein was part and parcel of the network of British-run influencers who use money, connections, and sex to maintain their central bank-run grip on the United States. And now Mandelson is the British ambassador to the United States. This is a lot bigger than blackmailing politicians, as disgusting and criminal as those activities are. Now put this in another light. The well-sourced John Solomon said that the FBI has quietly launched an investigation into a decade of Democratic Party and deep state antics from Russian collusion to Jack Smith, opening the door for the appointment of a special prosecutor to examine whether the well-documented episodes amount to a criminal conspiracy to meddle in 3 elections to the benefit of the Democrats and the detriment of President Donald Trump. This runs the full gamut of deep state activities, which will prove more about the inner workings of the deep state than a list of Epstein's clients. This is why Trump's fight with Fed Chairman Jerome Powell is so significant. While Charlie Kirk and his friends were in their Epstein frenzy this weekend, Trump unleashed his key economic advisors in a frontal assault against Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. Whether it was Treasury Secretary Bessent and Peter Navarro pounding on Powell's refusal to lower interest rates and on the Fed's tariff derangement syndrome, or OMB head Russ Vought blowing the whistle on the Versailles on the Mall Fed remodeling scandal, or the head of Fannie Mae Freddie Mac putting out an official statement hoping for Powell's resignation, the battle lines have been drawn. Imagine if Powell quit. And Donald Trump had a Federal Reserve head who would partner with him. Having a cooperating Fed chair is critical to Trump's economic revolution, which, despite the current sabotage from the Fed, is accelerating in a breathtaking way. Manufacturing jobs are returning, energy production is surging, and we see the beginnings of a real industrial renaissance. Trump and his economic team celebrated that yesterday in Pennsylvania at the Energy and Innovation Summit. President Trump and Senator David McCormick heralded the announcement of $92 billion in new energy and industry investments in Pennsylvania. Treasury Secretary Bessent declared the Rust Belt is no more, and nuclear energy was front and center, with Westinghouse announcing that it will build 10 new modern nuclear power plants over the next 10 years and create 15,000 jobs in southwestern Pennsylvania. This is what the imperial elite fear the most: a United States of builders and the emergence of a new alliance of producers and workers that will redefine the political landscape. Brandon Bishop of the National Building Trades spoke to this summit, declaring,
Mr. President, it's an honor to be here today representing North America's building trades unions and our 3 million members, especially the thousands of highly skilled workers across Pennsylvania who are ready to deliver on all of the historic investments being announced here today. All the projects discussed here today aren't just about energy and innovation, they're about job creation. And all of us in the building trades stand ready to deliver. If you want the highest quality, most productive, long-term labor certainty, partner with us from day one. Don't just build with us, stay with us and maintain it for decades.
That alliance of builders, producers, and workers is the American system. And that is what the City of London and the global financier elite have been trying to stamp out for over 200 years. Peter Navarro recently did a beautiful series of posts on the American system. He said, "The early GOP was the party of tariffs and industry. From Lincoln to McKinley and into the 20th century, the Republican Party fought for American workers. Trump has revived that GOP, reconnecting it to its pro-worker, pro-sovereignty roots." And then he said, "The American system is about building things in America, by Americans and for Americans. It's about using tariffs to protect our industries, investing in infrastructure to move our goods, and creating a national bank to finance our growth." Did you notice that? Creating a national bank to finance our growth? That would be a stake through the heart of the British central banking system. And the British elite and their ambassador Mandelson understand what Trump is doing better than most Americans. He's intent on dismantling their entire system of financial control. That's why they're responding with everything they've got: war threats, financial manipulation, and yes, focusing you on the Epstein files rather than on the total strategy to win the war. So here's what's really happening. Trump is leading a second American revolution, this time against the financial empire that's controlled our economy for over a century. The Epstein story isn't just about sex trafficking. It's about how the elites use every tool at their disposal to maintain financial control. The Ukraine crisis isn't just about territorial disputes. It's about whether sovereign nations can exist or whether we'll all be vassals or pawns of a global empire. Trump understands this, Putin understands this, we understand this, and increasingly the American people are beginning to understand it. The sound and fury about the Epstein files is designed to keep you focused on the salacious details while missing the bigger picture. The real battle is between the empire of money and the sovereignty of nations. Trump is fighting that battle every day, and he's winning. But he can't have people sitting in the barracks getting whipsawed back and forth by media-generated reports of defections and demoralization. That's why your support for Promethean Action is so crucial, because we are out there leading the fight. We give you battle reports, not just commentary. And paying members are the backbone of our movement. Because of your support, Barbara and I will soon be launching a new live show, and our subscribers will be the first to know. So join the fight and stay focused. Thanks for watching.
Please take a moment and subscribe to our free newsletter at PrometheanAction.com.